Kingston. The Madonna of the Woods in the project space, and I'm really happy to be showing it, and it was a wonderful coincidence because our work really corresponds. So I have been a painter most of my adult life, and then about 6 or 7 years ago, I switched completely to sculpture for various reasons and a few serendipitous events. And I think the only thing I brought with me from painting is color. I couldn't leave that behind. For this piece, I wanted to explain some of the influences. And the central one, I'll show you, I'll bring this around because it's small. I don't know what magazine I cut it from. You can see this man here. It's a stump that was cut in the Canadian Boreal Forest, a cold weather forest. And you can see it's huge. And the forest has just been clear cut, and it's a painful image for me. And I have it on my studio door. Think of it as my.
How big was the tree?
What did you say?
She wants to know how big the tree was.
Oh, this big, really, really huge. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute because it's what's called a mother tree or a hub tree. Anyway, I think of it as the St. Sebastian arrow. I see it every day, and I have it on my studio door because I don't want to forget what's going on with the environment. So this is very central impetus for me making this piece. And the second image is just something, a painting by Piero della Francesca that's been in the back of my mind for ages. This was completed in 1474, and it has this descent. Is the ostrich egg, the Madonna central, then some angels and the saints, and then the common man, which is the Duco di Montefeltro, who commissioned this painting, and he commissioned quite a few of Piero's paintings, fortunately for us. It has stuck in my mind about this painting is the ostrich egg. It's always been kind of a mystery to me about why it's there. It turns out that ostrich eggs in late medieval times in European churches were put in the churches as a kind of exotic attraction. And people would hear about it and come into the church and hopefully stay for Mass and be a congregant. So it's kind of an advertising stunt, I suppose. But it also, in this painting... Well, I'm getting to that, yeah. No, this is the most important thing to me, is I think of this, the seed, the egg, as the great potential of life about to be, or not. And I also think of it as the prime source. This beginning that, if we're humble enough to think about it, is kind of unfathomable. How did we get here? And we're animated, and we have this intelligence. And so I have an ostrich egg in my piece hanging over it as if it's element number one, and then the stump, and then the reflective surface underneath the mirror. So this is just an influence. And then the third influence is really Susan Simard's book. She's a forest scientist, and it's called Finding the Mother Tree. And I was very influenced by this book. She started out as a university professor. She didn't have much money to do experiments, but she and her students did hundreds of experiments with usually makeshift equipment. And she found out things that kind of turned much of science on its head, mainly about this idea that there are systems that cooperate, as opposed to this idea always survival of the fittest. So the first thing she found out is that there's this incredible unseen network underground, which is what fascinates me. And it's this cooperation between fungi, and they have these mycelium, these little threads that go out into the earth, and they combine with the roots of the trees. And there's a reciprocation, because what comes down from the trees feeds the fungi, and what the fungi have, all these minerals, feeds the trees. They have each has a different attributes that they give to each other, and it's absolutely necessary to keep each other alive. Then she also found out that different tree species cooperate. So the first thing she found out was the Douglas fir and the birch, and she used these isotopes to find out that it just took 1 hour for them to be exchanging substances. And what the birch has, again, is something that the fir doesn't have. So the birch actually has these microbes that are very beneficial to keep the disease down in the fir. And the fir can provide water to the birch. The birch needs a lot of water when it doesn't have it. And so then the other thing she discovered, which is central to my piece, is this idea of mother and mother tree. She coined that term. I think it's probably not acceptable to all scientists, because they like to call it a hug tree, more neutral. But anyway, the oldest, biggest tree in any part of the forest is the tree that is helping to keep everything else alive and healthy. They're all connected underground. The biggest tree has genes from another era. You know, a tree could be 500 years old. It has a different climate knowledge stored within it. It has the biggest canopy, like a photosynthesizing machine. That material comes down and feeds all the young trees. And it just goes on. And here's the big thing, it's the carbon sequester. And we need these trees to protect us. So I've been fascinated with trees. You know, they don't move, they're mute. And somehow we can just cut them down. And we forget that they're taking the carbon out of the air for us. So they're absolutely essential. And thanks to her, Susan Simmer, we know a lot more about them at this point. So that was a big influence on my making this piece. The making of the piece was a little strange. I felt like the piece married me, and I had no escape clause. I was stuck with the piece for like 6 months. I had no idea that I wasn't going to be working on other things, but it just kind of took over my life. It's made out of 3 different clays, and originally I was just going to have kind of a root system sticking out of the stump. And then I said, well, maybe I should finish the inside, which was a lot of work. I finished the inside, and then I said, well, maybe I should have really high underneath a kind of mycorrhizal system, just some depiction of it, and make it very colorful. I wasn't thinking about people seeing it. I was thinking of just I would have some hints that it was under there, because we don't see what's underground in this. You know, it fascinates me. So that took a really long time, because I had a few materials, and then I realized just visually it didn't have the heft, so I added more materials. And then I got the brilliant idea of putting a mirror underneath, which caused some further difficulties, because then I had to raise the piece up so you can see underneath. So I experimented with the heights, and I had these really ugly stanchions, and I kept adding to them to make them less ugly, the piers, and they were too high. So this piece was so elevated it had no longer any relationship to the ground. And I had a month left, and I was going on vacation, so I thought about it the whole vacation, and I said I could have cut those in half. And then I came back, and I realized, well, when I confronted them, I said, they were cement and steel. I said, I'm not going to cut those. So I just made new ones out of more natural materials, which is what I tried to do in the first place. But I had learned more engineering by that point, and so I ended up with what I have now. And just one last thing, I think that the last stage in a piece is really when it gets into the gallery and it's seen and people comment on it. That's the making of the piece, and I always forget that there's this point, and it's so marvelous. So for instance, one woman came along and she just got it. She saw this stump and she said, oh my gosh, she saw how it's all gashed here. And she said, that's so brutal. And I instantly thought of how, as children, we have a very unfiltered, direct, feeling relationship with the environment. And somehow that gets curated and educated in a way that maybe we're missing something. And I feel like right now it's missing, and I'm not a message artist, and I'm not a research artist. I just like to go and work in the studio and make things. But I do feel what's missing is a sense of, as Anne said, a sense of reverence. And these trees, you could have a relationship with the trees. So, thank you, and we're very happy that you came here.